China, Russia, and Iran are going to stand firm because they know that if one gets broken, then America will go after the next one. Mm-hmm. And if the next one is broken, they go after the last one. They know they have to stand firm together. We've entered a very tense 2 to 3 years of geopolitical pressure points. And this at a time when the fragility of the global financial system is being exposed. So you're heading for very volatile times. And it's why that I conclude by saying, in gold we trust.
You're watching CapitalCosm. My name is Danny. It is June 12th, 2025, and my guest today is none other than my good friend Simon Hunt from Simon Hunt Strategic Services. Simon, thank you so much for coming on the show, my friend.
Well, thank you for having me again.
Yeah, well, it's a pleasure having you on again. You're always chock full of insights. I'm reading through some of the key highlights of your latest newsletter here, but I'm going to open a door to you. What do you think is most prominent on your plate right now? What should be most prominent on the radar screen of investors as we move forward in this chaotic world?
That is a huge question. And I'm going to answer it this way, and then we'll be more precise. China is standing firm against America on trade. Mm-hmm. Russia is standing firm on its war against NATO in Ukraine. Mm-hmm. And Iran is standing firm against America on its ability to enrich uranium for peaceful purposes. That is the global background that we should be well aware of, because if any one of those escalates, and I think that they all will escalate, then the complacency that embodies investors globally will be blown away. Whether that happens this year, next year, or the year after is a different question. But for the immediate future, I think the risk that Iran will be attacked either by Israel on its own or by a joint exercise between Israel and America is a very high risk, one that could happen very imminently. When that happens, some of the complacency in markets will be destroyed. And of course, what does that imply? It will imply very high oil prices as part of Iran's retaliatory moves will be to shut down the Straits of Hormuz, through which 20% of global oil supplies are shipped through.
And you also had the CEO of JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon, echo the same thing that you just said. He was quoted earlier today saying that if an attack in Iran does occur, whether it be from the U.S. or Israel, you're looking at oil prices well north of $120, $120, $130, somewhere in that ballpark. And if President Trump is serious about bringing down inflation, this will easily bring it up to. This will bring up the CPI back up to over 5%. This was Jamie Dimon's words, not mine. So he seems to be in agreement with you.
Well, I think what's also interesting that Jamie Dimon sold all his JP Morgan stock on the 20th of February. That I think is just as important. Why did he do it?
He said all of it or just a fraction of
it?
it?
All of it. I was told all of it.
Okay. That's a big deal. That's in the hundreds of billions of dollars, I would presume.
Yeah.
So we're starting to see oil get a bid. We're now looking at gold getting a bid. Gold is up at 34.12. Could it be on the verge of knocking out a new all-time high? What is gold trying to tell us? Silver's getting a bid too now. It's well over $36, $36.24 at the time of this recording. Platinum is getting a bid. It does appear like commodities are starting to run. Is the smart money loading up on commodities ahead of something similar to why Jamie Dimon has unloaded JP Morgan stock?
I think we have to be precise on more precise on commodities.
Sure.
Gold reflects geopolitical pressure points. Therefore, what gold is telling us is that something is going to break somewhere in the world, whether it be against Iran, whether it's the trade issues against China, or whether it's Ukraine. But there's a bid under gold for this one simple reason. It reflects geopolitical pressures. Therefore, as we move into the next 2 or 3 years, these pressures are going to increase, and thus we should think of in gold we trust.
And as we were talking about before we hit record, wars throughout history have always been inflationary. They've never been deflationary.
Dead right. But let me come back to the question on commodities, because the initial reaction of base metals like copper will be to sell them off, because what wars will do will be to decimate economic activity on which the base metals depend for demand. So I think the initial reaction, taking copper as an example, will be to see prices falling from the 7,000 level to around the 7,000 level by into the early months of next year. And then as central banks and governments throw everything into the sink to revive recovery, we then get this 24-month inflation-driven recovery in which copper prices and other base metal prices will double in value.
I see. And how do we figure in the China and U.S. trade war into all of this? We do appear to have made some progress. The U.S. will take in 55% tariffs from China. The U.S. will impose 55% tariffs on China. China will impose 10% tariffs on the U.S. As far as I can see now, we're awaiting confirmation from President Xi Jinping to sign off on it. Is that a good deal it sounds like it's a good deal for America, no? Or is there more to the story?
It's a temporary truce. It will break down pretty quickly, certainly before the end of the year. I come back to my opening statement that China, Russia, and Iran are standing firm against America.
And it's bringing
Each,
America into a regional power as opposed to a superpower.
each of those three countries have prepared themselves for confrontation with America.
And are they all working in tandem with one another? Because if we're to take what we're seeing at face value, the U.S. or the Trump administration appears to be trying to drive a wedge between Russia and China, right? Trump is acting
Yes.
more as a mediator than an aggressor. Will that work, or most likely
No,
not?
it won't work. I mean, Washington is very worried by two specific developments and many others. The first one is that China has the most competitive and efficient manufacturing supply chain in the world. Now, what they are implanting on that efficient structure is automation, robotics, powered by A1
AI?
to make, I'm sorry, AI, to make the manufacturing chain super, super competitive. Already you have in China factories run only by humanoids, no factory workers anywhere in sight. What does that mean for costs, the prices of goods that they sell? And it de facto increases their capacity. That scares, excuse my language, scares the living daylights out of the policymakers in Washington. And the second fact that worries the Pentagon is that China is usurping America's military dominance in a wide range of equipment, particularly in airspace. So you add the two together, what does this actually mean? It means that the principal foreign policy in Washington is to strangle China. This complicates issues much further because China, Russia, and Iran operate hand in glove, constant dialogue. If you do this, we do that, so on and so forth. So it's all, their plans are all coordinated.
So what about like the Middle East? Though? What about the Gulf countries? They appear to Turkey, including Turkey as well, even though Turkey's not a Gulf country. But where do they stand? They seem to be kind of caught in the middle here. What side do you anticipate them breaking to when it really comes down to it?
That's a very good question. The sense I get is that as the Gulf countries have been dominated by America for so long, that their primary policy will be to support America. That said, I believe, and I'm not 100% sure, that they have told America that should there be an attack on Iran, you will not be allowed to use your bases in our country. Again, being typical Arabs, they hedge their bets. UAE is a member of Brics. Saudi Arabia is not yet a member of Brics, but they've moved in a different direction, which is very, very interesting. The Shanghai Gold Exchange is building gold vaults in all of the BRICS countries. And I believe that the vault in Saudi Arabia, if it's not completed, is very close to completion. What does this mean?
If you're looking for great deals on gold and silver coins and bars from a company that you can trust, then you've got to check out the good folks over at Pimbex. This year, I've really gotten to know these guys, and all I can say is you're not going to deal with a better group of people. They're a family-owned gold and silver online bullion company offering the essentials and more at industry-leading prices while always providing first-class top-tier service. That's PIMBEX.com. And if you're looking to convert some or all of your retirement account into real gold and silver, give Pimbex a call. They'll help explain the process and get you started on the right path. Your support at Pimbex also helps support the channel. So reach out to Pimbex today. You won't be disappointed. And make sure to tell them Danny sent you.
Saudi sells oil to China. China pays for it in CNY. China also exports a lot of goods to Saudi Arabia using CNY. So there is, at the moment anyway, the Saudi Arabia holds a surplus of CNY. They can now hedge that through the Shanghai Gold Exchange Gold Vault in Saudi Arabia. This is very close to what has been happening between Russia and China, because Russia exports more goods to China than China does to Russia. How is the differential held? By gold in a PBOC vault. So gold through the back door is becoming an important asset within the monetary system.
And what of silver? What about the other precious metals? Do you anticipate
that is for a different use altogether. It's not part of the monetary system.
Right. And so is that why we're starting to see this sell-off in US T-bills? For the first time ever, you've had the market go up since 2022, but bond yields have gone up with it. Now, if you track bond yields over time, we've looked at this chart many times on the show, but when you track bonds have been in a bull market for well over 35 plus years. But in 2022, they broke out of that bull market. Yields have spiked. They've remained elevated no matter what the market does, no matter what sentiment looks like. And you can't help but wonder, this really did start in 2022. What happened in 2022? The Russia versus Ukraine war. Okay, what's the big deal there? Well, that was when the U.S. confiscated all these Russian assets and pretty much signaled to the world that the United States jurisdiction was not as safe as it appears to be. So to segue into the Russia-Ukraine theater, first of all, is that what you see happening in the bond market, right? Was that really the catalyst for the revitalization of Brics? Because Brics was MIA all the way before 2020. There really wasn't any mention of Brics, or they weren't really newsworthy up until 3 years ago, when the world really did need an alternative to the SWIFT system and the U.S. hegemony and so-called, and all this stuff.
Yeah, I think you're right. It was America freezing Russian assets that woke everybody up. And since then, the Brics Sherpas have been working overtime to develop not just their new currency, which will have a gold base to it, but the Brics Development Bank, a whole stream of institutions that basically will rival those in the West. So I think whilst many people think nothing will emerge from next month's BRICS summit meeting, I disagree. I think we will see policies emerging from that meeting that will point the way forward. The problem is going to be in reaching a unanimous decision, because America is wooing India very strongly. And under the BRICS Charter, you have to have unanimous decisions. So whether it means that, I asked an Indian friend of mine who's well informed. I said, for how much longer can Modi do the two-step dance? His answer was, until he has to finally stop the dance and make a decision. So, it's very clear that policy emerging from Washington is an attempt to destroy BRICS before it becomes a real risk to the American-led hegemony. So I think that initially the thinking was we can do it by attacking BRICS as a frontline attack, as it were. But it seems that the policy is switched. Let's take one at a time. Get one, and then maybe we can get the other two big players. But as I said before, the three major players versus America are all coordinating their policies.
And is that why Iran has kind of refrained from retaliation against Israel throughout the last couple of years? Because, they did promise 3, that never came about. And I interviewed one of my prior guests, Chris Weichert. He was saying that from his sources, Iran was being influenced by Russia not to escalate in the Middle East, because preparations were not meant for an all-out war yet. Do you see Iran being influenced by Russia in that way, so that to kind of restrain themselves?
I think influence is the wrong terminology. I think they're working together, the three of them. And I don't think that if Iran does not want a war but is prepared for a war, and they've been preparing for it for the last 20-odd years. But if, having suffered so much from sanctions, tariffs, freezing of their assets as well, that if they have to fight for their independence, they will, and they're prepared for it. So I would say that Russia was, yes, having an influence, but that influence on don't retaliate yet fitted Iran's own thinking.
Mm. Understood. I did mention that we were going to get into the Ukraine theater. So let me get your take here. I'm looking at your latest newsletter that you sent me earlier today, and it says Moscow will ensure that Russia holds all of Ukraine that the country needs for its future security, probably including Kiev and Odessa, even should the EU enter the war more directly. So don't we, if you look at a map of Ukraine, aren't all of the Russian speaking provinces or areas located east of Kiev? And so if they were to try to take all of Ukraine, wouldn't they come across major resistance in the non-Russian speaking areas in the process?
Yes, but how strong will be that resistance? How many? Don't forget, Russia has 640,000 fighting troops in Ukraine at the moment. A large number is what I call the frontal assault force, which will move towards the Dnieper River, if not beyond. There's a large contingent in the northeast that on orders can move down to Kiev. There is another contingent in the south that can move towards Odessa. The reason why Russia needs control one way or the other over the whole of Ukraine is that within a few years, America will have hypersonic technology, if not the equivalent, and a boundary line along the Dnieper River is not going to give Russia sufficient early warning signals.
Mm. So it's an absolute must from a security standpoint.
Oh, it's an absolute must. And Putin has been saying time and time again, we need to negotiate the future security architecture of the whole of Eurasia. Only then can the future of Ukraine be discussed, be negotiated sensibly. So that one of the points I make is that forget any peace agreement this year or probably next year. And a lot of the enthusiasm for equity markets in Europe has been based on the logic that we have a peace agreement, and therefore there will be enormous infrastructure gains for European companies to make.
And it appears
it won't happen.
Yeah. And it appears that if we do see a kinetic attack on Iran and something in a kinetic exchange between Iran and Israel and the U.S. military bases in the region, does that not benefit Russia as well, given the fact that the attention and energy will be focused on Iran as opposed to Russia in this case? Wouldn't that enable Russia to fulfill their agenda of taking more land of Ukraine?
Yeah, but what it also does, it raises the price of oil and gas, which of course is Russia's main export.
Yeah, they'd like that too.
Their finances will immediately benefit, other than the fact that if America joins in this attack with Israel, then a lot of the Pentagon's energy will be focused on the Middle East.
Mm-hmm. And then what happens in Ukraine then? Like, let's think second order effects here. What happens? Like, okay, we see something kinetic in Iran and in Middle East. What happens in the other regions? What happens in?
Well, I think if you listen to these EU delusional leaders, they are talking about physically going into Ukraine to help Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
Why, you have to ask? They've got intergovernment debt problems, they've got immigration problems, and they've got electorate problems who are fed up to their back teeth by being told by an unelected bunch of people in Brussels what to do and how to do it. So
Gotcha.
These leaders need a diversionary tactic. What better than war?
Mm-hmm.
And if Europe goes in, then that would allow, if America goes into the Middle East, that is, if they do, then Europe can take over the front running in Ukraine.
And is this why economic growth, both on the national U.S. scale and the world scale, is really a facade, a mirage at the moment? All of these risks kind of signal a faltering of economic growth, do they not? And why? And this is, I mean, you write in your latest newsletter, and why financial markets will become unnerved. So, what happens to the financial market at that point?
Well, the first thing is that all the optimistic forecasts about the US, Europe, and the global economy will be thrown out of the window. That's the first point. Secondly, there's enormous complacency in financial markets. The fact that you have a war breaking out will probably burst that complacency. And particularly, don't forget that Moscow has stated very clearly, and Putin directly to Trump, we are going to retaliate strongly against your attacks on our nuclear bombers, which were located in the open on airfields in compliance with the START treaty to which you signed. So we have yet to see that retaliation. We've had minor ones, but not the real one yet. That is coming. Now, because NATO was involved in these attacks, because they could not have been undertaken without the technical expertise and the satellite surveillance that is available to NATO. Under Russian law, they would have the right to attack any NATO member country that was involved in these attacks on their nuclear bomber fleet. But I think if they did that, it would really open a very nasty can of worms. So I think that when this attack occurs, it's going to, what word do I use? How do I describe it? Obliterate any military installation whether Ukrainian or NATO, such as the NATO bunkers, they are going to destroy them.
I see.
It's coming. It's coming.
And taking it back to the financial markets, what does that do to the bond prices? I see you've got another item here. It says by early 2028, long-term bond yields will be over 10%, including the 10-year U.S. Treasuries. The wheels would then come off the global financial system. Are we going to see a run on bonds in about 2 to 3 years' time?
Yeah, definitely. Why? Because inflation always runs in cycles, and we are approaching the bottom of the inflation cycle. But a combination of war, energy prices rising, food prices, which are already rising. I mean, for instance, I just looked at the FAO's food price index. Year on year, it's up by 6% globally. And some of them, you've got meat prices up 7%, dairy prices 22%, and vegetable oils up 19%. So it's already starting. So by the time we get into early 2028, if not in 2027, US and global inflation will be well over 10%. What does that mean to long-term bond prices? They will be in double digits. And what does that do to the global system? That's highly leveraged, with debt to GDP at over three times. The wheels come off. We're not in recession. We're in something worse. And we'll see big smacks to equity and base metal prices, just to name two.
Is that when hyperinflation really begins in the United States, when the dollar ceases to be the world reserve currency, when no one wants U.S. bonds in the same way that they used to before? All that capital that was in the bond market, which is the biggest bond market of them all, which is the biggest market of them all, I should say, bigger than the stock market, way bigger than the gold market. All that capital has to find a new home. Not all of it, but a good chunk of it has to find a new home. You look at the gold market, $20 trillion market cap. Silver market, not even $1 trillion. I think it's like in tens of billions, 20 billion or something like that. So when, I could be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but the point being is that you've got these relatively small markets in the precious metals markets, the commodity markets, and all that capital flooding, looking for a new home. Is that when we start to see money printing galore in the United States, supply side inflation kicking into high gears? Is that what we're looking down the barrel of?
Yeah, what you're looking down to the barrel also is that the banks, the pension funds, and the insurance companies in America will be forced to hold a set percentage of their assets in US treasuries. So you are monetizing the debt.
Got it. I have a question here from, and big correction on my end. The estimated silver market cap is 2 trillion, so way above and beyond 20 billion. So my apologies there, guys. We have a question from one of my Substack viewers. This is bonus content for the Substack audience. If you'd like to become a Substack member and ask questions to my guests, link is down below. Subscribe and get early access and ad-free versions of all my videos and the ability to ask questions on these videos here. But we're going to move over to Substack questions. This is bonus content for the members. This is from Jack Leons, and his question is, what happens when the Fed begins yield curve control? We'll see what happens. It's definitely turbulent times. Anything else that we didn't cover, Simon, that you want to get into before we wrap up here?
Well, I come back to that early statement that I made to you, which is that because that's going to be the foundation of household savings. I would add also that food security should be paramount. If you have a garden, build your vegetable garden. Food prices are going to soar, not only because of these geopolitical tremors, but because of climatic change, such as the Gleisberg cycle, which is scheduled to hit next year. The last time that we had the Gleisberg cycle was in the 1930s, that caused the Midwest Dust Bowl.
Really quick, what exactly is the Gleisberg cycle?
There was no rain.
Does that creates colder climates too, doesn't it?
That's why it was called the Dust Bowl.
Yeah. Isn't that also conducive for colder climates? You've got less moisture in the air.
That comes as part of the change in the long-term weather pattern. It could be precipitated by what's called the Beaufort cycle, which is the cold water that's trapped around Greenland. When the ice melts, it floods into the Atlantic and so causes the seas to become so much colder that they absorb all the excess CO2 emissions. And it's all part of the long-term weather cycles. We are about to emerge sometime in the next 2 to 3 years from 40-odd years of warming cycles into 40-odd years of cooling cycles. NOAA actually said in September 2019, I think it was, when all these government weather experts gathered together and came up with their forecasts, and it was on a NASA NOAA website that promptly got deleted, but I managed to hit it before it was deleted. And NOAA actually says, we're not going into a cooling period, we're going into a cold period. So get by your woolies now.
Sound wisdom here, Simon. Thank you so much for coming on, my friend. Where can people find you if they want to hear and see more of your work?
Simon-Hunt.com.
Excellent. We'll have to link that down below. Simon, thank you so much for coming on. Guys, if you enjoyed this podcast, just like I did, drop us a like, comment, go Simon, go in the comment section. If you disagreed with any of our takes, let me know too. I do read the comments, but do let me know what you disagreed on. Let me know what you agreed on too. And, whether you have the answers or you don't have the answers, or you have part of the answer, let me know your thoughts. It may gin up, some thoughts on my end, and we can, take it from there. But liking, subscribing, commenting, doing all the YouTube stuff does, in fact, go a long way in helping support the channel and the algorithm. So much appreciated for all of your help there. Again, if you want to become a member of my Substack, it's capitalcosm.substack.com. You'll get a chance to ask questions to all of my guests before they come on air. And you'll also be able to make guest recommendations down the line. You also get these videos early, ad-free, no YouTube ads, and uncensored for the ones that warrant it. So with all that said, thank you for your time, guys. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time.